Hi and welcome to Mermaid Tears. Today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about resin and working with resin, which again is something that I'm fairly new at, so I've gone ahead and made some of the mistakes for you guys, and I'd like to hopefully help you to correct them. One of the things that I did the first time that I used the resin was it was still quite sticky when it was done, and I didn't really understand why that was. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what to do to avoid making it sticky and what to do if it does happen to still be sticky when you dry. So the resins that I have tried using are this art resin. I don't know if you can see that. And it was probably one of the nicer ones, although I haven't really found that much difference yet. And then the next brand that I used was this Envirotech brand here. And then I just ordered this East Coast resin online, and I haven't tried it yet. Now, most resin I'm finding is 1 part to 1 part of resin. So 1 part resin, the epoxy, and 1 part the hardener. And it's really important that you follow the directions on the packages because all packages are different, and you want to make sure that you get that ratio exactly. If you don't, then it's not going to cure as well, and that's part of what's going to leave it sticky. It's also important that you don't mix brands. So I don't want to use the hardener from one brand and the resin from another brand, because the chemical reaction and the way it is set up is so that they work equally with each other. So they might have different chemical balances, in which case it wouldn't work to have them combined like that. So you want to stick brand with brand and make sure you mix carefully. Some of them I found go by ounces and some by milliliters, and of course you never really know what to do. So I started off using a shot glass that I found, and I liked the shot glass because it talks about half an ounce, 1 ounce, quarter ounce, 1.5 ounce, so it had it all outlined for me. But then if I wanted to do a bigger project, I found I had to kind of keep moving it over. So I went to this anchor hooking, which I just found at Canadian Tire, and it's got the ounces as well as tablespoons and milliliters on it, so it's a little bit easier to break it down. And then when I was out the other day at the dollar store, I found this plastic one that can go even higher and gives me a bit more room for the mixing inside of it. Some people will mix it in together, some people will pour it into separate things. I find mixing it together in one thing is a lot easier. Mixing brings me to point number 2. If you don't mix it well enough, it's not going to have time for that chemical reaction to form. So while you might do just a quick little blip, 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 blip mix, which I did the first time because I'm very impatient, that's not enough. You really do need to take your time to mix it for about 3 minutes. I noticed one brand, which is probably why I didn't buy it, wants you to mix it for 7 minutes, and I'm not going to sit and mix for 7 minutes. While you're mixing it, you also want to make sure that you're getting it off of the sides and the bottom to mix it all evenly, or that part's not going to set with the rest of it and it'll pour out differently. So to help with that, I picked up a selection of different silicone these thingies that name I can't think of at the moment, spatulas at the dollar store, so I can use those for mixing right around the edges and making sure that I really get in there and get it all and get it turned. So the second part is having dirty or wet utensils. I'm finding it hard to figure out how to clean resin. Maybe that's something I should look at for another video. So mine are quite often still really dirty, so I've got to work on that. But if your stuff is dirty, then it's going to leave opportunities for air to get in where you might not expect it to, or there might be moisture within the dirty parts. If it's wet, water and resin are not friends at all, and so it's not going to set properly if there is any water in there, any chance of water to get in there. That includes making sure you clean out and dry your molds properly. I know a lot of times it's easy to just give them a quick wipe and assume it's done, but you really want to make sure that everything is clean and dry. Some brands don't like latex molds, so that's another thing to make sure that you're using silicone molds, because it doesn't hold the moisture in like the latex does. Something else to consider is the temperature, and that's not just including the temperature of where you are letting it to sit and dry, but also the temperature where you are leaving your bottles in. If you're leaving them in direct sunlight, then they have an opportunity for condensation to form and for water to automatically build up inside the resin. And if you're storing it somewhere where there is a lot of moisture, then again, that's going to slow down the drying process, but hopefully it would eventually harden in that case. So ideally you want it to be about 72 to 77 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm Canadian, so that means nothing to me, so I'll have to go on and convert it. If it gets cooler than that, the resin's going to be thicker and harder to mix, so it's going to have more bubbles in it, and it's going to take longer for it to be dry to the touch. And of course I talked about not mixing the brands. The other thing to consider when you're looking at it is the age of the resin. I don't know if my bottles actually have ages on them or best before dates, so you might have to just gauge that. If the resin is too old, then it might have collected moisture in the bottle or air bubbles in the bottle, and that will help it not set correctly. You also want to think about anything that you're putting into it. If you are adding any type of sand or jewels, or maybe you're adding more sea glass, if that has moisture on it, that's going to also impact how well it dries, of course. So you want to make sure that whatever you're adding is also completely dry to your resin. If it is something that is naturally moist to it, so maybe it's a clay or a wet sand base, just seal it with a glue first, and you can do that with a liquid sealer or a spray sealer, and that way you'll make sure that it is not keeping any moisture in there. And for some reason, I'm not really sure what the logic is on this, but there must be an explanation out there. Thin layers actually take longer to harden than thicker layers. So keep in mind that if it is a little bit thin, then it is going to take a little bit longer for it to harden to the touch. After 8 hours of sitting out, your resin mold is probably still going to be sticky. It's very likely that it might still be a little bit after 24 hours, but by 48 hours it should not be sticky at all. If it is, then you may have done something wrong. If not, then just leave it a little bit longer. Resin actually takes 72 hours for it to complete its whole chemical reaction process, so don't be too impatient. Just give it some time and see what happens. I hope that this helped to give you some idea on what to do when using your resin to make sure that you do not end up with a sticky tacky type project at the end. If you have any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, tips, or tricks that maybe I didn't mention, I would love to hear those in the comments below. Or, of course, you can visit my Facebook page, which is www.mermaidtears.ca. And I hope that you are having an absolutely fabulous day.